What has to happen for Nico Rosberg to publicly praise his greatest historical rival? What he said after Hamilton's performance in Monza 2025 not only reveals respect, but something much deeper. What did Rosberg see that the rest of the world overlooked? Monza, the cathedral of speed. A circuit where errors do not hide and the successes are shouted on each straight at more than 330 km per hour. There, where the Tifosi Ruggen and each asphalt meter is printed by Ferrari's DNA, something changed in Lewis Hamilton. And it wasn't just a good career. It was a silent statement. A warning for the rest of the paddock. Monza was, in theory, an unfavorable circuit for Ferrari in 2025. The SF-25, although more stable after the latest updates, continued to show a clear weakness in intense braking areas and posterior traction, two key elements in this layout. Charles Leclerc arrived as the alleged internal leader, while Hamilton had an irregular classification, leaving from the 10th position. Few expected the British to be the protagonist, and yet it was. From the first laps, something showed different. Hamilton's SF-25 not only seemed more balanced, but transmitted trust. The partials in the technical sectors, especially in Lesmo 2 and the Ascari variant, showed something that had not been seen throughout the year. Consistency, precision, and an almost surgical cleaning. But what surprised even more was emotional reading. Because Hamilton was not just going fast. I was quiet. I was comfortable. I was confident. Telemetry data were revealing. At the points where steering wheel corrections, poorly managed torque peaks or traction losses were registered, now there was harmony. The curves linked without violence. The inputs to the brake and the accelerator were soft, progressive. It was as if the car and the pilot finally spoke the same language. And that, in Formula One, changes everything. According to sources close to the team, this transformation was not a product of chance. During the previous weeks, Hamilton had worked silently with engineers to redesign their approach. He abandoned the idea of imposing his style. Instead of forcing the car to adapt to him, he decided to rebuild his technique from within. He analyzed in detail the telemetry of Leclerc, studied how Monegasco dosed the braking, how he modulated the accelerator at the curve output, how he balanced the aerodynamic load. And on that basis he began to rebuild. The most shocking thing is that it was not a resignation to its essence as a pilot. Hamilton did not become a copy of Leclerc. He simply learned to translate his aggressiveness into control. He redefined his style. His late braking, which made him so many times into a legend, was refined with surgical precision. It was no longer a hammer breaking the stopwatch. It was a scalpel. Fred Vasseur, team director, acknowledged after the race that he had ordered a complete internal review of Car 44 after detecting small aerodynamic anomalies that could be affecting the balance. What they found was subtle but key. A mismatch in the calibration of the rear diffuser, whose correction allowed a dramatic improvement in the stability of the rear train. It was the last link that was missing for Hamilton's adaptation work to make sense. And in that context, Nico Rosberg appeared. The world champion, a man who knows Hamilton as few, did not limit himself to praising a performance. His analysis was almost introspective. He said, without hesitation, "This was a very important weekend for Lewis. It was the best he has had throughout the year. But it is also a testimony of how bad it was before. It was not a free compliment. It was the recognition of a real, deep, almost emotional transformation." Rosberg saw what many overlooked, that Hamilton had not only recovered his speed but his essence. That pilot had again been that, even when he does not have the best car, he finds a way to be there. To make you feel. To demonstrate that his talent does not depend on the wind in favor, but on his ability to adapt when everything plays against. In the last laps of Monza, while climbing positions until I finished 6th, Lewis did not attack with rage. He attacked with conviction. I didn't need to demonstrate anything, just flow with a car that finally replied. And that moment, that exact point in which a pilot merges with his machine, is when magic occurs. Monza was not a victory, but it was a personal triumph. The type of victory that is not measured at points but in what changes inside a pilot. Hamilton had crossed the desert, and in Italy he found his oasis. Not to celebrate it, but to fill with energy before continuing to fight. Because if there is something that made this metamorphosis clear, is that Lewis Hamilton has not come to retire in Ferrari. He has come to rewrite his legacy. And that chapter began in Monza. What happened in Monza was not limited to a better technical management, not even a brilliant runway execution. The real change was invisible. He was in Lewis Hamilton's head. And that is precisely what made their rivals get nervous. Because a car can improve from one race to another, but a pilot who recovers his trust, That is a much more durable danger. After the weekend in Monza, Hamilton not only walked differently for the paddock. I spoke differently. His body language had changed. It was no longer the content gesture of those who seek answers, but the upright position of who knows that he has found them. In each press conference, his words were not revenge, but of reaffirmation. "We have taken a step forward," he said. But those who know him well know that this phrase had a deeper subtext. I have taken a step forward. This type of emotional transformation is not common. In Formula One, a pilot who starts a season badly, even more with a change of team, usually enters a difficult spiral to reverse. The media pressure, internal criticism, the constant comparison with its teammate, all that mine morals. But Hamilton is an atypical case. His experience, his maturity, and his resilience history make him someone capable of using pressure as fuel. Ferrari, meanwhile, also changed his speech after Monza. The team, which until then had tried to protect Hamilton with vague statements about adaptation and process underway, began to talk about real progress. The engineers openly recognized that the data of the SF-25 in the hands of Lewis had made a qualitative leap compared to the large prizes. The pilot's inputs were now much more precise, which allowed the car with greater confidence to configure. And that, in practical terms, means that Ferrari now has two valid sources of track development. It no longer depends solely on Leclerc. The psychological effect of this recovery is not limited to Ferrari's box. It also hits the other teams. Red Bull, who until that moment saw Hamilton as a threat contained, began to take note of his partials. Mercedes, his old house, understood that the post-Hamilton stage would not be so simple if his legend began to build his second act. Even in McLaren, where you breathe renewal and ambition air, there was a change in the way in which Lewis is discussed. Respect has returned, and with him, caution. But the most powerful is not external respect. It is internal reconciliation. Monza was the point where Hamilton stopped fighting his new team and began to truly join him. He stopped looking for excuses and began looking for solutions. I didn't talk about what the car could not do. He talked about what he could do with the car. That change of mentality, although invisible to the average spectator, is the true catalyst of success in Formula One. And that also translates into its relationship with the Ferrari environment. The mechanics, the strategists, the engineers, everyone feels when a pilot begins to believe. And when that pilot is Lewis Hamilton, that impulse is transformed into a current that covers the entire technical structure of the team. It is an emotional domino effect. The pilot believes, the team responds, the car improves, the results arrive. Not vice versa. This is the Lewis that many thought it would not come back. The Lewis that converts hostile circuits into strengths. The one that transforms crisis into motivation. He who needs only a spark to set the championship on fire. And what Nico Rosberg saw from the analysis cabin was that. Not only a rival reuniting with its speed, but a man reuniting with himself. Rosberg, who fought against the best Hamilton in the most intense years in Mercedes, better understood that anyone means. And he said it with all his lyrics, this is the real turning point. I didn't speak only of Monza. He talked about the championship. He spoke of the Lewis that, when he connects body, mind, and car, it becomes a force that very few have been able to stop. This new Hamilton is not the one that came to Ferrari with promises. It is the one that begins to fulfill them. And if Monza was the first signal, the rest of the grill should be prepared, because the pilot who seemed lost has returned more hungry than ever. What happened in Monza goes beyond a simple statistical recovery. It is not the story of a pilot who added good points or a race that went well. It is the type of moment that divides the seasons into two. Because what Hamilton did in Italy was not winning. It was resurface. And such actions have a much higher value than any momentary podium. Hamilton showed us that talent is not static. That even the greatest should and can evolve. He showed us that it is not enough to have 7 championships for a new car to obey you. You have to relier. You have to unlearn old vices. You have to literally start from scratch. And do it with humility. In an era where young pilots dominate the narratives, where the new generation is talked about as if the old no longer had a place, Hamilton appears to break that story. To say without saying that time has not ended with him. That is not here to go around nostalgia. It is to win. And if that implies changing his style, he will. If that implies accepting that your partner exceeds it in the first grade awards, it will also accept it. But he is not going to give up. It will not be static. And that is the most inspiring. Because all pilots can have a good car at some point, but very few are able to rebuild when everything falls apart. Monza is a warning. To the rivals, because Hamilton has found rhythm. To Ferrari because they now have a pilot who can lead from the inside without excuses. And to the history of Formula One because a new chapter is beginning to be written. Not a farewell, but one of redemption. Nico Rosberg's words were not empty praise. They were the recognition that something deep has changed. Because Rosberg knows what it is to face Hamilton when he is at his highest point. And if someone like him detects that this version is back, the rest should take it very seriously.